My name's Reuben Russell. I'm 71 years old. I built houses in Tulsa for 41 years, poured the foundation of half the neighborhoods on the east side with my own two hands. I buried my wife, Kayla, 3 years ago, and I raised one son, Luca, who I thought turned out fine. Good job, nice wife, Emily, two grandkids I loved more than my own heartbeat. I was wrong about him. Took me a long time to see it, and by the time I did, it had already cost me $41,000 I'll never see again. Here's how it started. 6 months back, Luca called me sounding like he'd been crying. Said Emily's father had a tumor, needed treatment their insurance wouldn't touch. $14,000, he said, and he'd pay me back by spring. I didn't ask questions. I drove straight to the bank and wired it that same afternoon. That's what you do for family. That's what my daddy taught me and what I taught Luca back before I knew he wasn't listening. 2 weeks later, I asked Emily how her father was doing with the treatment. She looked at me like I'd spoken another language. What treatment? I felt the floor tilt under me right there in my own dining room. Luca jumped in fast. Said I must have misunderstood, said it was just a scare, nothing serious. But I saw his face, I saw hers, and I knew, right then, standing over a pot roast, my son had lied to me for $14,000. I didn't say anything that night. I told myself I was wrong, told myself he wouldn't do that to me. A man spends 40 years telling himself stories to keep his family whole. After that, I started watching, really watching. The way Luca brought up my house every time we talked. You should think about downsizing, Dad. Somewhere smaller, easier to manage. The way Emily's eyes went straight to my hands whenever I signed anything. I wasn't losing my mind. I was 71 and I still climbed my own roof to clean the gutters. What I was losing was my son, piece by piece. And I hadn't noticed the theft until the shelf was near empty. Then came that text. No warning, no lead up, just, "Don't expect me to take care of you." I sat down at my kitchen table and I didn't cry. I want to be honest with you about that, because there's no use pretending. I felt something colder than sad. I felt my hand go steady in a way it hadn't been in years. I thought about every check I wrote him, every time I said yes before he even finished asking, every Sunday dinner where I sat at the head of the table like a king in his own house, not seeing I was being measured for a coffin the whole time. I picked up my phone. I typed back 2 words, "Okay then." I hit send and set the phone face down on the table. My hands weren't shaking, not one bit. If my son wanted to draw a line between us, fine. I'd draw one too, except mine was going to have teeth. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I know some of you have a son or a daughter who's done you the exact same way, made you feel like a burden for the crime of getting old. If that's you, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and how old you were when you found out your kids saw you as a bill instead of a father. I read every one of them. Because what I did next, I didn't do out of anger. I did it because 41 years of building things taught me one thing above all else. You don't leave a foundation cracked. You tear it out and you start over, even if it means starting over alone. That afternoon, I called a lawyer, a man named Arthur Berry, recommended by a neighbor who'd been through her own family war. I sat in my truck outside his office on 21st Street with the engine running, my hand on the door handle, and for one long minute I almost drove away. Then I thought about that text again. Don't expect me to take care of you. I got out of the truck. I had no idea walking through that door just how far my son was willing to go once he found out what I'd started.
Arthur Berry's office smelled like old coffee and paper. He was maybe 50, sharp eyes, didn't waste words. I liked him right away. I told him everything. The $14,000 for a cancer treatment that never existed, the comments about downsizing, the text. He wrote it all down in that cramped little handwriting of his, and when I was done, he set the pen aside and looked at me straight. "Mr. Russell, you understand what you're describing is a pattern, not one bad moment, a pattern." "I know it," I said. "Took me too long to see it, but I see it now. I want to set up a trust, move your assets, the house, your pension, the savings, so they're protected. Once it's done, it's done. Hard to undo." I didn't hesitate. Do it. Then he asked me a question that stopped my heart cold. "Does your son have access to any of your accounts? Joint accounts, anything like that?" And I remembered. 4 years back, when Kayla was in the hospital those last few months, I'd added Luca to my checking account so he could handle bills if I couldn't get to the bank. I meant to take him off after the funeral. I never did. Grief makes you forget things like that. "He's on my checking account," I said, and my stomach dropped when I said it out loud. Arthur leaned forward. "Mr. Russell, you understand that means he can see every dollar that moves. He'd know exactly when you had cash to lend. He'd know exactly when you didn't." I sat there doing the math in my head, and it added up to something ugly. Every time Luca called needing money, it was right after I'd gotten a payout, a bonus, a tax return. He wasn't guessing, he was watching. "Close it," I said, "today." I drove straight to First Tulsa Bank, the branch on Memorial where I'd banked for 30 years. The manager, John Black, had known me since he was a teller barely out of high school. "Mr. Russell, everything all right?" "Close the joint account, John, today, and help me open a new one somewhere else." He didn't ask twice. Signed the papers, handed me a cashier's check. And I walked out of that bank feeling like I'd cut a rope that had been strangling me for years without me knowing it. The silence lasted 3 days. Then, Saturday morning, I was out front trimming the hedges Kayla planted 20 years ago, and I heard tires screech into my driveway hard enough to leave rubber. Luca's truck. He didn't park it, he abandoned it, door hanging open, engine still running, and came through my gate like a man on fire. "What did you do?" he shouted. Not hello, not how are you doing, Dad? What did you do? I set my clippers down slow, on purpose so my hands wouldn't shake in front of him. "Lower your voice. Your mother planted these hedges. Show some respect for where you're standing." "The account's gone. I went to check on it and it's just gone. Where's the money, Dad?" "It's not your money, Luca. It never was." He got close to me then, closer than my son had ever stood to me in his life, and I smelled the panic coming off him like sweat. "You don't understand. We need that account. We're counting on it." "For what?" I asked. "You've got a good job. Amelia's got her degree. What do you need my money so bad you're screaming at your father in his own yard?" He didn't answer. He just stared at me, jaw working. And in that silence, I saw something I'll never forget as long as I live. My son wasn't angry that I'd been hurt. He was angry that a door had closed on money he'd already spent in his head. "Get off my property," I said. "You're going to regret this, old man." That's what he called me. Old man, not Dad. "I'll get lawyers. I'll prove you're not fit to manage your own affairs. Everybody knows you've been acting different since Mom died." He turned and stormed back to his truck, and the tires threw gravel across my lawn as he tore out of the driveway. I stood there in Kayla's hedges with my heart hammering, and it wasn't fear that had me shaking. It was the sound of my own son threatening to have me declared incompetent in the same breath he used to demand my money. I walked inside, locked the front door, then the back, poured a glass of water I never drank. I had no idea that "I'll prove you're not fit" wasn't just something Luca said in anger. He'd already started making the calls. 3 weeks of silence. No calls, no truck in the driveway. I told myself it was peace. I should have known better. With Luca, silence was never peace. It was reloading.
Sunday morning, I was at the kitchen table with my toast when I heard a car pull up. Not screeching this time. Gentle, careful. Then I heard the thing that took every wall I'd built and knocked it flat in half a second. My grandkids' voices in the yard. I opened the door before I could stop myself. "Grandpa!" My grandson Owen hit me around the waist like a linebacker. My granddaughter Ruby wrapped herself around my leg. And there, behind them, stood Luca and Amelie. Dressed nice, Amelie holding a plate of cookies like this was a church potluck. "We thought we'd surprise you," Amelie said, smiling with her mouth only. The kids kept asking where Grandpa went. I should have shut the door. God help me, I let them in. We sat in my living room, the same couch Kayla and I bought for our 20th anniversary, and for about 10 minutes it was almost real. Then Amelie sent the kids out back to look for lizards, and the second that door clicked shut, the smiles dropped off both their faces like a mask coming loose. "Let's stop pretending, Reuben." Not Dad, Reuben. "You're sitting on money you don't need, and your own family is drowning." "Drowning?" I said. "You drove up in a truck that costs more than I made my first 10 years pouring foundations." "That's not your business," Lucas snapped. "It became my business when you asked me to pay for it." Luca leaned forward, voice low and mean in a way I'd never heard from him in 38 years. "We need that trust undone, Dad. Move the money back. Do that, and we go back to normal. Sunday dinners. Family." "And if I don't?" Amelie looked at her nails like she was bored. "I guess you don't value family, and if you don't value family, you don't need to see Owen and Ruby." The room went dead quiet. I heard the refrigerator hum. I heard my own pulse in my ears. "Say that again."
"You heard me," she said. "We'll tell them Grandpa doesn't love them enough to help. They'll forget you exist." I looked at my son. I waited. Lord, I waited for him to say, "No, Amelie, that's too far." He didn't say a word. "Get out," I said, voice cracking on it. "Get out of my house." "Think about it, old man," Lucas said, standing. "You're gonna die alone in this house." They gathered the kids from the backyard, Owen crying, confused, and shoved him in the truck. I watched from the window as my granddaughter's face pressed against the glass, waving like she didn't understand why I wasn't running after them. I made it to the bathroom before I got sick. I sat on the floor of my own bathroom, 71 years old, shaking like a kid. But somewhere between the shaking and the cold tile, something in me hardened instead of broke. I got up. I splashed water on my face. I told the man in the mirror, "You do not fold." I called Arthur that night and told him everything. He went quiet a moment, then said, "Reuben, write it all down while it's fresh, every word." I did, hands shaking the whole time. I thought that was the worst of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, my neighbor, Ava Hawkins, caught me at the mailbox, arms crossed, giving me a look I hadn't earned. "Reuben, I don't want to pry," she said, "but Amelie's been saying some things at church about you not being yourself since Kayla passed, forgetting things, getting confused." I stood there with my mail in my hand, stomach turning to ice. "I haven't forgotten a single thing in my life, Ava." "I believe you," she said, "but she's telling everybody, the Hendersons, the pastor. She's already asked around about who handles guardianship cases in this county." I drove straight to Arthur's office, my hands so tight on the wheel my knuckles ached. "They're not coming after me in a courtroom yet. They're coming after me in the neighborhood first, turning everybody I know into a witness against me before they ever file a thing." Arthur leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. "That's not paranoia talking, Reuben. That's strategy. If they can get enough people believing you're slipping, no judge blinks twice when they finally do file. They're building their case out of gossip. I sat there in that office and felt something I hadn't felt since Kayla's funeral, the ground moving under a life I thought was solid. How do I fight whispers, Arthur? He looked at me steady. The same way you fight everything else, with proof they can't argue with. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake thinking about every neighbor, every old friend from church, wondering how many of them already believed the story my own son's wife was telling about me behind my back. I had no idea, come Sunday, just how far Amelie was willing to take it, right in front of the whole congregation.
Sunday morning, I almost didn't go to church. Something in my gut told me to stay home. I went anyway. 30 years I'd sat in that pew with Kayla. I wasn't going to let anybody chase me out of it. I should have listened to my gut. Service ended, and I was in the fellowship hall getting coffee when I heard Amelie's voice carry across the room, pitched just loud enough for half the congregation to catch it. Honestly, it's so sad. He wandered into the wrong Sunday school room last week looking for the sanctuary. We're just worried sick about him living alone. I hadn't wandered anywhere. I hadn't been to this building in 2 weeks. I turned around, coffee cup in my hand, and every face in that hall was looking at me with that soft, pitying tilt of the head people give a man they think is falling apart. "That's a lie," I said, and my voice came out louder than I meant it to. The room went quiet fast. Amelie's face didn't even flinch. She turned to Pastor Compton standing beside her, all wide-eyed concern. "See, this is what I mean. He gets agitated so easily now." I have never once been confused about where the sanctuary is in this building. I helped pour the concrete for that parking lot in 1987, Amelie. I know this church better than you know your own kitchen. Lucas stepped in from the side, hand up like he was calming a spooked animal. "Dad, come on, nobody's attacking you. We're just concerned." "You're not concerned," I said. "You've been telling people at this church I'm losing my mind for weeks. Ava told me. You've been building a case against me out of casseroles and coffee hour, and you didn't have the nerve to do it to my face." The room was dead silent now. Pastor Compton looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. "Reuben," Amelie said, voice trembling on cue, "you're proving my point right now, getting this upset in front of everybody." That's when I understood what she was doing. Every word out of my mouth, every ounce of anger I had a right to feel, she was going to point at and say, "See, look, unstable." I was standing in a trap built entirely out of my own justified fury, and the only way to lose was to keep swinging. So I stopped. I set my coffee cup down slow and steady, the same way I used to set a level down on a foundation to check it was true. "I'm going to say this once, and I want everyone in this room to hear it clear," I said. "My son told me to my face he wouldn't take care of me when I got old. Then, when I made sure he couldn't get his hands on my money either, he and his wife decided the story would be that I'm losing my mind. That's not concern. That's a smear campaign, and you're running it in a church." I walked out, didn't look back at a single face, got in my truck, and sat there in the parking lot shaking, not from doubt, but from how close I'd come to giving them exactly what they wanted. Arthur called that evening after Ava phoned him herself, shaken, saying she believed me now. She'd heard the whole thing. "This actually helps us, Arthur. A public accusation with witnesses cuts both ways. If they ever try to use this to challenge your competency legally, we've got a room full of people who watched Amelie perform it in real time and watched you respond with more clarity than anybody in that hall." "I don't want it to help us, Arthur. I want it to not have happened." He was quiet a second. "I know." I hung up and sat in my dark kitchen a long time, the same table where I'd read that text 6 months back. "Don't expect me to take care of you when you're old."
I thought I'd already hit bottom with my son. I was wrong. There's a particular kind of pain in watching your own child stand in front of people who've known you 30 years and try to make them believe you're not really you anymore. But 2 days later, Arthur called with something that would turn my grief into something else entirely, something colder and a lot more useful. "Reuben," Arthur said, "I had the investigator pull Lucas' financial records while we were building your defense. You need to sit down for this."
Arthur laid the folder on his desk and slid it toward me. "Reuben, before you look at this, I want you to know it's not what you think. It's worse." I opened it anyway. 6 years of my son's finances, laid out in black and white. Not medical bills, not hard luck. A boat he used twice a summer, 2 trips to Europe, Amelie's cosmetic work, a country club membership. Nearly $200,000 spent beyond what the two of them made together, while Luca was calling me crying about a cancer treatment that never existed. "There's a foreclosure notice, too," Arthur said quietly. 6 months behind on their mortgage, started before you ever closed that joint account. I sat there staring at numbers that didn't make sense to me. Good jobs, nice house. How does a man drown that fast? Then Arthur turned the page, and I understood. These are inheritance advance loans, shadow lenders. They give you cash now against money you're set to inherit later. Your son borrowed against your death, Reuben. Signed papers 3 years ago betting you'd pass and leave him everything, and soon. I felt the floor of that office tilt under me the same way it had the day I got that text. 3 years. While I was writing checks for a fake tumor, while I was sitting at the head of my own table on Sundays feeling like a lucky old man surrounded by family, my son had already priced out how long I had left to live and borrowed against it. When you moved your money into the trust, you didn't just cut him off, you defaulted every one of those loans. He owes lenders money he was counting on your funeral to pay. I didn't say anything for a long time. I wasn't sad anymore. I was somewhere past sad, someplace flat and clear, like the morning after a storm when you walk out and just start counting what's broken. "I don't want to go to the police," I said finally. "Whatever he's done, Owen and Ruby don't need to watch their father get arrested. I didn't think you would, but you should write him something. Not for the court this time, for you." I went home and sat at my kitchen table and wrote my son a letter by hand. "Luca, I know about the loans. I know you borrowed against my death 3 years ago while you sat at my table calling me Dad. I know your wife stood in a church fellowship hall and told people I was losing my mind so nobody would question it when you came for what was left. You didn't do any of this out of need. You have a good job. You did it because somewhere along the way you decided my money belonged to you before I was even gone. I won't bail you out. I won't pay debts you built waiting on my heart to stop. But I'm not cruel either. There's a list of debt counselors and a family therapist's number folded in with this letter. Use them, for the kids' sake if nothing else. My door isn't locked to you forever, Luca. It's locked to the version of you that bet on my funeral. If you ever become a man horrified by what he did instead of just broke from it, we can talk. Until then, don't call. Dad." I mailed it. No return receipt. I didn't need to know the exact moment he read it. I already knew what would follow. Silence. And this time it would be the real kind, the kind with nothing left to say. Winter came hard that year. Snow on the ground by December. 2 days before Christmas, a knock came to my door I wasn't expecting. A court-appointed woman named Kayla Reed, holding paperwork, with Owen and Ruby standing behind her in coats too thin for the cold, small bags in their hands. "Mr. Russell, your son and daughter-in-law have entered transitional housing. They asked if the children could stay with you through the holiday." Transitional housing. The boat, the trips, the club, all of it gone with the rest. I knelt down in my own doorway,
and my grandkids ran into me like nothing had ever happened between the adults around them. And for a moment, none of it mattered. Not the trust, not the fellowship hall, not the loans. Just two cold kids who still thought their grandpa's house was the warmest place in Tulsa. "Is it Christmas here, Grandpa?" Ruby asked. "It's always Christmas here for you two," I told her, and I meant it with everything I had left. They stayed 3 days. We baked cookies that came out crooked and burnt on the bottom, and I didn't care one bit. When the car came to take them back, Ruby held on to my leg at the door and asked if they could come again. "Every time they'll let you," I told her. "I'm not going anywhere." I heard through the neighborhood months later that Luca and Amelie were working retail jobs across town, renting a small place, learning slow and hard what it means to earn $1 instead of expecting one from a father they'd already spent in their heads. I won't lie and tell you I don't grieve him. I do, most days. I grieve the boy who used to ride in my truck to job sites and beg to hold the level. But I don't regret the wall I built. I learned something at 71 I wish I'd known at 40. You cannot buy someone's love, and you sure can't stop someone from taking your money if you keep leaving the door open for them. I still live in the house I built with my own hands, still get up early, still keep the porch light on, in case two kids in coats too thin ever need somewhere warm to knock. I am Reuben Russell. I'm 71 years old. I'm alone in this house most days, but for the first time since I buried my wife, I'm not lonely in it. And if there's one thing I want you to carry out of this story, it's this: you're allowed to protect yourself, even from your own blood.